You still laugh, but somebody else before you. Do whatever. Grab a seat. We've got more chairs at the front. For anyone else that's dropped in.
Oh, go hard.
No, you have to like build up, otherwise it goes. I'm losing patience. If you're still standing up, you have a last chance to grab beer before you sit down. Or if somebody else wants beer, wave at someone that's standing up. I think we've hit the end of the food. Sorry, there was a brief gap with no vegan food, but we did manage to plug that. Just vaguely trying to waste time, so yeah. So we've heard about a bunch of problems, some sort of diagnoses. Basically, shit's hard. We've heard a bunch of problems. Lawrence is going to share a little bit about how to fix them, kicking us off in the second half. Okay, round of applause for Dr. Lawrence Newport.
Anybody who wants to follow me, message me, anything like this, please do. Carry a pigeon, come and see me individually. But otherwise, please, if there's one thing you can take from this is one example. I've been doing campaigns for a little bit since then. It's the same thing over and over and over again. If you really believe in something, put together a small group of people and find a route through. I'm more than happy to help out, give advice, etc. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lawrence. Tom, if you could. I'm starting to sense a theme coming out through these. We often get themes, and they only emerge on the day. So, are you slides or no slides?
I'm no slides.
No slides. Amazing. So that means I can do this. If I can find the button. No, I'm going to do this. Okay, you start talking while I do this.
I'll start talking. Thanks, Joe. Apologies in advance. I got back from a month holiday yesterday, so I've done a very kind of back of the bag packet presentation on the tube over here. And I'm going to bring down the energy a bit. I feel like I'm going to bring this out and do like an acoustic set. I don't think I can match the energy. So I'm a civil servant. I'm part of the blog, part of the problem. And we've heard a lot so far about some of the kind of the processes, the institutions, and I completely wholeheartedly agree with everything we've heard. Like, there's a lot of problems, and I'll talk to them about you when I'm not on camera. But I thought I'd talk a bit about the policy-making process, and obviously we heard then like a policy that's very much in the public eye on the front pages. I work in tech policy, particularly tech supply chains. Which is not on the front pages, and it's not usually the top of a minister's inbox when they're worrying about whatever the shiny new thing is. So the policy making is often done by civil servants in the background, and ministers obviously interrogate it, and they make sure that it's adhering to party lines, and make sure that they're happy with what's going on, but a lot of the work is done in the background. And it's really, really hard. Making policy and like running a country is really difficult work. It's not helped by all of the institutional blocks that we have, but it's really, really complicated. So I thought I'd just run through an example, and that is of 5G supply chains. I'm sure you remember a couple of years ago, the whole thing kicked off with Huawei. Huawei supplies probably at the time around 50% of our 4G and 5G networks. Obviously 5G was still being built out. A report was published. It's bad that we're relying on Huawei, which is allegedly linked to CCP and all of the geopolitics that surrounds that. Okay, fine, we kick out Huawei. Oh wait, that leaves us with a duopoly. So only Nokia and Ericsson are the other two suppliers of 5G kit in the UK. And there's a reason that Nokia and Ericsson are not names that most of you will have heard in about 15 years. They're companies that have had their ups and downs. So that's when my team came in. It's like, okay, we have basically a broken market. We have a really consolidated market. And our entire economy is running on this. Like, our entire telecoms network is supplied by two struggling companies. How has this happened? How do we fix it? And we can't really do that easily. There's no quick fix. There's no, we can just regulate or pass a law for this. You need to undo 20, 30, 40 years of market degradation. And I think it comes back to Stephen's point right from the start of these little kind of incremental words added here, sub-clauses added there to a law, a regulation added there, and it all adds up, and suddenly you have a really, really massive pile of barriers to entry for new entrants, particularly in tech markets, and particularly in a market which is very high volume, low margin. So how do we go about trying to solve that, and why is it so hard? And the reason it's so hard is because it's a lot of things going on. So the first issue is it's a geopolitical issue, right? Fundamentally, underpinning this all is kind of the US-China tech Cold War, which is kind of one of the driving factors. So you're engaging with senior politicians on how they see this geopolitically, and obviously the Foreign Office and Number 10 are like right at the front of that. As well, you've then got to talk to your allies. I don't think we're allowed to say allies. I think like-minded countries, I think is the politically correct term, and understand kind of what their priorities are on this. Make sure that we're aligning with the US, Australia, Japan, Brussels, etc. Then we've got to think about things from like the national security angle of this. Of okay, like we have a Chinese company which is allegedly linked to the state, supplying most of our critical national infrastructure in the telecom space. Number 10, again, interested. But then we start to get into the more techie space, so the National Cybersecurity Centre, which is a wing of GCHQ, and other kind of bodies like that, you know, the techie nerds who actually make sure that we're not getting hacked all the time and stuff, and talking to all those guys. Then you have to get into the economic security side of things. 5G and telecommunications, again, underpins so much of the economy. You've got a lot of that is on the what if things go tits up, how do we make sure that we're not subject to massive outages and things like that. And we see kind of things to report in Australia a couple of months ago where they had an outage for about 24 hours because there's some kind of basically patch that went wrong. But then you also got the upside of things where you have what used to be BASE, and God knows what BASE has been, about 15 different things now. Looking at like how can we use this new technology to enable smart factories, flying cars, blah blah blah, and look at kind of the economic upside into the future. So you've got those guys in fact. And then you've got the actual tech itself. You've got to talk to universities, spin-outs, the actual kind of incumbents themselves, the main suppliers, the Nokia and Ericsson in this case. You then got to talk to suppliers and network builders, so BT, Vodafone, etc. And then you've got the new challengers who might be wanting to break into that. So you've got so many different industry perspectives as well, incubators. There's so much you can look at in the industry. And then, as I said, it's a market problem. Now, I'm an economist by trade. I have a master's in applied economics, and I used to work in tech before. I was at IBM for a few years, and a company called Liberty Global, who owned Virgin Media and a few other things before that as well. And you realise that it's an economic problem. This is a market that's got broken barriers to entry, and that's why it's consolidated for such a long time. So you see, you've got so many different factors you're trying to consider, so many different stakeholders you're trying to please, and come up with like a single policy to address that. Obviously, in this case, it's not as simple as let's ban a thing or whatever. Like it's used to kind of 10, 15 year program, but you still got to come up with something, and it's going to piss some people off. And I think what the critical failure here is communication, because most civil servants, despite what Jacob Rees-Mogg believe, are smart people and they're hard-working people and they want to get things done. And they are partially held back by the institutions, but they're also held back by a lack of communication. Like, really good work is done behind the scenes. This stuff wouldn't get through all the millions of counter-signatories that Fabian was talking about. Treasury wouldn't be funding this stuff, having gone through 15 business cases, if it wasn't really well thought out, good policy work. But for some reason, that's not communicated. In the pub, like in the Excel bullies and that kind of stuff, yeah, it is because it's on the news. But for most stuff, it's not. Especially because most of you guys are technologists. I spend all my time trying to explain to people the rationale behind our work. So many people think it's, oh, we're just kind of doing what the Americans have told us to do, whatever. No, we have really robust policy rationale for what we're trying to do. But that's not communicated. And when I do communicate it, it doesn't feel like it's taken on board. So I think there's two halves to that. I think a challenge that I would put to all of you is try and talk to government more. People are always happy to talk to industry government and understand why they're doing what they're doing. Because there's always a good reason. It's just not always that clear. And it's partly on our problem to solve that. But the one chance I put you is try and find contacts in the relevant government department and ask them why they're doing what they're doing. And it'll probably make your life a lot easier, and you feel less like you're butting up against government all the time, and more like you're working with them because you can understand why they're doing what they're doing. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Josh? You're going to do an acoustic set as well, aren't you?
Yes.
So it sounds like from Tom's talk there, summary is, we know that there are too many words and we want fewer words, like like-minded countries instead of allies. So too many words, and some of the many words are very high quality, sounds like you're saying. They're just not read by the right people, maybe, not communicated well. Cool, well,
Fantastic.
handing you over.
Thank you very much. Well, I apologize for my attire because I realize it's a casual day today, and I left my house and I'd already dressed up smart because I'm terribly afraid of not fitting in. But here we are. Thank you so much, Joe, for organizing all of this. It's the first time at Newspeak, and it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. Oh, sorry. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you, talking about this wonderful topic of how to fix government. So I have just one key experience that I want to share with you in terms of the problem, and then also some insights in terms of what we should look forward in terms of fixing government. I think all of the things that have been said are really great contributions, and I hope this will there will be some touch points along the way with what's already been said. So in 2020, I was invited to join a team working in the Department of Leveling Up on a review, an independent review that Number 10 had commissioned. Boris had specifically commissioned it, and it was called the Faith Engagement Review. Nothing like that had been done before. There had never been an extensive investigation into what the public, especially in the faith communities, thought about how government was treating them, how policy was treating them, and just their general representation in government. And this was an incredible window into some of the inner workings of government, but also the challenges that you come across even when Number 10 is behind you, and they've put forward that as a top priority. So the three points that I would make overarching all of this is that the competing priorities of government are always a major factor. No matter how much you have behind you, you're always going to be competing with something else. And in this case, it was commissioned in 2019, then the pandemic hit. You've already got your problem. The second point is the departmental inertia. It's kind of been mentioned a bit before. Lawrence mentioned this, but the swamp of regulation and process, which is in the civil service, but particularly the problem of change, and too much change actually, the lack of permanence and the lack of collective memory across departments, so that you can actually tie together where we are and where we should be going. And that was one of the major problems that we encountered, the lack of that. And then the final point that I'll be elaborating on is the lack of consistency in the leadership, the lack of conviction and vision to see a problem and follow it through, even when you have Number 10 commissioning it. There's still a lot more to do. I saw this quote recently from Samuel Taylor Coleridge from 1831, and I thought it was quite appropriate, especially with regards to everything that's been said already. But he said, consistent truth and goodness will assuredly, in the end, overcome everything. But inconsistent good can never be a match for consistent evil. Not to say that government's evil, but but I think whatever our opinion is on that, we certainly need more consistent good, whatever on whatever party line we stand. And on that point as well, I think it's really important in all of this discussion to recognize that our institutions have developed over hundreds of years, and change never happened quickly. But there has been significant change. A lot happened in the 19th century, and a lot of that was conditional on the leaders. But so a couple of points on my experience in government. One of them was that hold on, let me see where we are. Oh yes. So the issues that we were actually dealing with were fundamentally related to what you would usually consider issues of concern for the MP and the minister and the politician, related to the interests of the people they represent. We were dealing with issues of forced marriage, of unregistered marriages, of honor crimes, of really significant things. And we did an extensive investigation into this, and then eventually managed to put this on the table of every MP. But on the launch day, none of the ministers who corresponded to this issue turned up, and there's been very, very little. It's been crickets from them, and even something that was commissioned by Number 10. It's quite surprising that there hasn't been a follow-up from that. So my conclusion from all of this is that the responsibility fundamentally lies on the people to consistently follow up and follow up and follow up and follow up. And I do like what was mentioned earlier about finding out why government's doing what they're doing and getting an answer, because sometimes they have no idea what they're doing. And we did find that there was a couple of points where we were probing into some departments, and I got like one line from them about what they were doing in like the 2000s, and no one knew anything about what was going on back then. And so that's pretty much all I have to say. Consistent good will overcome evil.
Thank you very much for communication, talking to people. Turns out there are civil servants whose entire job is to like reply to emails from people, which sounds kind of wasteful, but it's actually kind of cool because you always get a reply.
Until AI takes over.
Sorry?
Until AI takes over.
Until AI takes over.
They are trying.
And then you'll get a reply faster, maybe. Way better than me, because if you email me, you won't get a reply, because I don't read my email. Derek. Derek, okay. Give Derek a round, he's coming out. Ad lib while I find your slides.
Hi everyone, I'm Derek, great to meet you all. I guess I'll give a little background on who I am while the slides come up. So my name's Derek, I'm Canadian, but living here in London. I really got interested in government when I went to university, because that's when I fell in love with all these big challenges that we face, whether it's climate change, inequality. I mean, you could just go through the list, immigration, all these other different issues out there. Yes, it's a fantastic book. I realized that these challenges are really big and challenging, but these are the big challenges of our time that we need to rise up to meet. How do we do this? How do we tackle issues that are so complex and big? And I realized the government, whether we like it or hate it, is the most powerful lever we have to work with. It is where we come together as a community, as a society, decide our values, create laws and policies to enforce those values. It's where we pool our money and decide to put it towards collective projects. Great. Problem. Government is broken. Fundamentally broken in so many different ways. And so I spent the next 7-8 years studying government and how do we fix government, innovation in government from all over the world. I then had the chance to actually get involved on the inside, and I joined the Government of Canada, where I worked for 6 years, really at the heart of digital transformation. And I discovered 2 things when I joined government. First, government is way more broken than I thought it was when I was on the outside, but in really weird ways. It's not about the things that you hear about oftentimes in news, it's about process. Like you heard tonight, it's really about the processes that exist, the red tape. But there's also a reason why all these processes exist. Processes are built in response and reaction to crisis that happened. They are, we talk about cutting red tape, what are we actually talking about? We're talking about cutting accountability, we're talking about cutting accessibility, decision-making processes. Each piece of red tape is there for a reason. It doesn't mean it's a good reason, it just means it's a reason and we need to be able to respond to that. But the other thing I discovered is that despite a lot of the stereotypes that are out there, the public service is full of amazing people who are obsessed about trying to figure out how to make it better. Just a couple weeks ago, there was an unconference where a bunch of public servants, in their spare time on a weekend, went and spent a whole entire day putting their heads together about how to make the UK government work better. No one asked them to do it. They did it of their own volition. And they've been doing it for 15 years now. Every single year, they get together because they care. They're passionate about this. Like, these are my people. I need to figure out how to help them. So I worked within the government of Canada, and then for the last couple of years, I've gone international. I work for an organization called Apolitical. We're a social learning platform for public servants. Basically, no matter what your role is in government, there's someone doing exactly the same job in every government around the world. And what we try to do is we try to connect the dots, connect you with your peers, and connect you with best practices around the world. And that's my job. I'm the connector. I get to talk to public servants around the world to understand what are the challenges they're facing and what's inspiring them and how do we build bridges together. But that's actually, well, I'm going to talk about one piece of that today. This is sort of a spontaneous impromptu talk I wasn't expecting to give. But I'm going to talk about a favorite book of mine that I read this past year by a woman named Jennifer Polka. Next slide. So this is a quote she has at the very beginning that I was so impactful because being a public servant is really hard. Most people don't like you. Your friends think you're part of the blob. The politicians, usually you're the easiest thing to beat up. It's really hard being a public servant because you care so much about what you're doing. You are a servant to the public. Most people who become public servants, that's why they get involved. So just having this quote here, just don't give up, was such a powerful quote. And a lot of my colleagues in the public service, when they read that had a huge impact on them. Okay. All right, we can skip this slide. Okay, Jennifer Polka, just for context, Jennifer Polka is one of the most influential people in the digital government transformation space in the world. She's from the United States, but GDS, that you've probably heard about, hugely inspired by the work of Jennifer Polka in the States, just for context. I won't get into the nittiness with that, so next slide. Okay, so I want to talk about some of the key concepts that are in this book, because I think they really hit upon what is broken about government. So the first thing is this concept of archaeology. And that's this idea that in government, you're constantly building upon the past. The problem is that means that whenever you're trying to implement a policy, or the other people, so government does two things. It develops policy, but then it delivers that policy. And there's a whole delivery arm of government as well. So whenever you're developing a policy, you have to understand all the layers of policy that could be influenced by that policy that you're trying to create. And usually what happens is instead of getting rid of old policies, you just add a layer. The same thing with regards to the technology stack the government has. Any piece of technology the government implements has to integrate with potentially 40, 50, 60 years of tech. So anyone who works in tech and government will tell you about how they're working with code that is sometimes 60 years old for pieces of what they're doing. You end up with this layer of technology, of policy, of just process, layer upon layer upon layer. That's my 3-minute warning, isn't it?
Yeah, 2 minutes.
Okay, next slide. Because of all those layers and layers and layers of policy, of process, you need a lot of expertise to understand how to navigate it. Public servants need to become experts in how to navigate the system of government. All those processes, all those layers, procurement, hiring, getting approvals, getting comms involved. There's so many different layers. As you heard, there's tons of different people you have to connect with. To get that level of specialization takes a ton of time. And so Jennifer Polka tells this amazing story about how it was a pandemic, they need to bring a whole bunch of people on to deliver services to people. The problem is they brought all these people in, and then they had to train them all. They didn't have time to train them all. The people had 17 years of expertise. You can't train that in a week or a month. So they actually had to put them all to the side until they got rid of the backlog. Being a public servant in government requires a ton of complexity and understanding how to navigate that complexity, which is a problem because it means that as soon as someone leaves, then you lose that institutional memory. But one of the other things that was mentioned by other speakers, there's a lot of churn that happens in the public service as people move from one section to another because fundamentally, if you want to move up in government, you have to move horizontally first, which is a huge frustration. What that means is it's really hard to develop deep level expertise in government, which then causes things to break down because nobody understands how things work. Next slide. Concrete boats. Yes. So one of the things that government has done, and it's just evolved over time, is it's really segmented into different pockets. And what happens is, because of the complexity, you end up being trained to just focus on your own little pocket. The problem is that things are really complex. And so you end up with a situation where Jennifer Polka tells a story about how she talked to someone about this program that they were trying to develop, and she's like, this isn't going to work. It's going to get you bad outcomes. And their response was, we know, but that's not our responsibility, that's someone else's responsibility. And they actually said, if we're told to make concrete boats, we'll make concrete boats because that's what we're supposed to do. And there's this system within government where you're incentivized to follow process. Because ultimately, if you can say I follow the process, you can cover your ass, right? Because that's what you're going to be judged against. Did you follow the process? If the answer is yes, you'll be okay even if the outcomes aren't what they want. You can defend yourself against that. This obviously creates a learned helplessness. It creates all sorts of huge problems. Next slide. The other thing that we kind of talked about is because there are so many people and teams, because of the segmented nature of government, it's in all these different pockets, there are so many teams. Like you heard in the talk that was just given, how many different people you have to connect with? Like 20, 30 different teams. And like there's a reason for that. Policy programs are really complex. There are lots of different factors at play. But the problem is you end up in a situation where no one has full accountability for anything. And so as a result, you have a ton of cooks and nobody wants to make a mistake. And so you get a lot of meetings, tons of meetings, where you talk about things. But very few decisions are made because nobody wants to be responsible for making those decisions. Because you don't have all the information you need, you don't necessarily know how you're going to be accountable for it. The result is lots of cooks in the kitchen. It also means that there is almost like if anyone has an objection, it can hold the whole entire process up. It just takes one person to be like, wait a second, and that'll hold the whole process up. As a result, these things that should happen really quickly, a couple hours, will take weeks, months, even years, and maybe never happen at all because of process. Next slide. Okay, so here's where there's things that are kind of interesting about how things work. So, new public, okay, I'm not going to get super nerdy, but new public management. Not go down that path.
We'll find it later.
There was a push in the 90s to really outsource everything. And sometimes there's a good reason to outsource. There's lots of good reasons to outsource. It makes things faster, you get things out of the muck that is government. The problem is, if you outsource everything, you also outsource the talent to run everything. Which means that all of a sudden you're now responsible for a whole bunch of things that you don't understand. And that's a really dangerous position to be in. It leads to lots of bad contracts. It also means that the specialization of government shifts from being experts on a particular given area, policy, program, whatever it is, to instead your expertise is about procurement, managing contracts. This does not lead to good policy outcomes in the long run. I think there's a need for some type of balance between outsourcing and insourcing, but the most important thing is you need to have the skills inside government to be able to talk about and engage with whatever the issues you are. If you want to have those skills in government, you need to give those people reason to be there. Because someone who's a specialist in something doesn't want to be managing a contract. They want to be actively engaging with the issues that they care about. So you need to empower them to do that. Yes, next slide. So I could talk about this for hours and I'm way over time already.
You've got 30 seconds.
Okay, when you are so focused and your whole entire life is spent on managing process and learning how to navigate the process, it's very easy to become disconnected from the people you're trying to help. And the danger is that government can get themselves into a situation where they're developing policies and processes and programs that are really about government process and not human need. And this is just an outcome. It's not malicious in any way. It's literally just an outcome of the context. It's human psychology, behavioral economics 101. You understand how a person behaves, understand the context they're in. This is the context that public servants are in. So of course we're going to get the outcomes. Even if you have really well-meaning, passionate public servants, you're fighting against the system, and the system will win. Next slide. I'll share this in the chat so you can go through this in more detail. All right, I'll skip this one as well. Trying to get to the end. Okay, no, go back one slide. Sorry. Okay, so the key thing is, so we talked about sort of what are the one-liners. The one-liner I'd give for this presentation is that the single biggest problem with government is legacy. Government is a 19th century institution using 20th century tools to solve 21st century problems. That is a huge part of the problem. So if you're in government, you are dealing with legacy systems all the way up and all the way down. And that makes it really hard to do anything. You can't just teach new ideas, you need to show how they can be applied in the system as it is. The key thing is that you can bring it. So I studied innovation in government. One of the biggest challenges, you can talk about innovation, but then you go into government and it doesn't work. The toolbox you have doesn't apply anymore because the context is so different. You have to learn how to innovate within a context that is the government as it is right now, with all of its layers of policy and process. How do you be agile within a waterfall context? These are things you have to figure out. There's this big push around digital, but the key thing around digital is it's not about tech. It's about culture, it's about delivery. That's the fundamental thing that those of us pushing for digital transformation are really talking about. It's not about tech, it's about culture, it's about delivery. Everything is connected and you need to understand the big picture. This is really hard when you're in these little siloed pockets. But I mean, that was the whole part of the policy process. You had to understand the whole entire picture. To develop really good policies, to develop really good programs, you have to see the big picture. That takes time. It's a lot of work. So this is, I guess, the key point for me in why I do what I do, is that creating change in the system is really hard. Emotionally, physically, it's just exhausting. Mentally, it's exhausting work, and you have way more failures than you have successes. And that's where community is so important. And so that's what I try to do. I try to build communities of support for public servants who are working for change. I mean, that's why this exists. This exists as a community where people can connect around common ideas and support each other, creating a change and creating a better world. What I'm saying is that exists inside government as well. There's a whole community of public servants who are passionately trying to make government work better. And I think what we need to do is find a better way to connect with them and support them, and be part of that community with them. And I guess I'll end there.
Thank you so much, Derek. So when Derek said that this was a very last-minute presentation, I've been emailing people at Apolitical desperate for someone to come. I don't think I mentioned that. I didn't actually realise you were at Apolitical. And yeah, it was just so good. Derek showed up and he was like, "Hey, I could share some of the stuff we've been doing." And it's like, so amazing. Another round of applause to Derek for last minute.
All good? Hello. So my name's Joe. Just to make it really confusing, there are only 3 Joes here tonight. There we go, a bit closer, wonderful. So for a bit of context why I'm talking about this specifically. So I'm the head of engineering at a company called Policy and Practice. My views on my own for the purpose of tonight. So what we do is we process data at a huge scale for the government. At current rate, we're probably going to be responsible for about £3 to £5 billion of benefits uptake this year alone. Where our entire thing is looking at data and how it works. So today I'm looking at the UCDS MOU and why this sort of shows the government isn't using data in a way that allows it to track you. So first we need to understand what the UCDS is. So this is the Universal Credit Digital Service. It's something introduced by DWP to allow local authorities to get data information about benefits. What is this information? It is when a benefits claim starts, it is when it continues, and when it stops. The reason for this is although UC brought a lot of things centralised, housing benefit along with legacy benefits were left to local governments. So if those local governments are going to manage those benefits, they need to be told when to do so. So DWP made the decision, hey, local authorities, you own this data. But we're going to tell you how to use it. And this is where we get into the problem. So the UCDS was introduced in 2018. And the first problem they encountered was they have this daily data feed. We have these, let's say 200 to 300 XML files dropping into local authorities on a daily basis. And those local authorities don't have data teams to process it. So they've suddenly got to work out, okay, of all these hundreds of files, which contain thousands of records, and if we're looking at the biggest local authorities, maybe tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of records, who do I need to give benefits to? How am I going to do that if I don't have a data team? So that's problem one. The second problem was, okay, I don't have a data team, let's go down the government route and get a contractor. Okay, DWP, I want to give this data to a contractor. DWP says no.
Sorry, what's the DWP?
Oh, sorry, Department for Work and Pensions. There's a central government department which manages benefits. So, okay, the DWP says, no, you can't do that. Legally, we've completely blocked that avenue. You're not allowed to share this data, even though you own it. And yeah, so we then end up with several years of lobbying. This is both from companies like mine, from other wider companies. And at the end of a 16-odd page document, to talk about too many words, we end up with this little paragraph, which is the whole premise that allows local authorities to share their data. And what it basically means is you need to talk to everybody, then come to us and tell us why you should do it. And even then we can say no. And that's the entire premise that allows local authorities to share data. And you might be thinking, okay, this is a local authority, they're now allowed to share data, they're now allowed to use data. But we have a small problem. This is for one data set. Now imagine you're a local authority and you've got fire, police, NHS, social services, all of these different services, and you want them to share data. You've got one legal gateway to do it. So, moving on to sort of the positives. It has changed slightly this morning. There was slightly less room before this morning, and then I got this wonderful Slack message. So I'm going to run through this really quickly. So to represent the good side of what we're talking about, there is room for change. Looking at least one civil servant here who's making positive change, like they do really care and they want to engage. And actually, if you can give them the use cases and you drive, where's my speaker, and you drive and you push and you engage with them, you can actually get really positive change coming through. But we need to look at where there isn't positive change. There isn't positive change because if you take the three biggest, perhaps in terms of data departments, which are DWP, Home Office, and HMRC, they don't share data between each other. So the man who collects your tax and the man responsible for distributing that tax and benefits, or woman, don't communicate. They have no correlation between those two data sets. So when we all think about this big brother government that's watching us, that's monitoring everything we do, that doesn't exist in the way we think about it. You have different departments with very siloed data who are making distinct decisions based off that one data set. And even then, they probably got it in the wrong file format. I know that from personal experience. So how do we stop this happening again? So I just want to leave two really clear call to actions. And I have the benefit of having worked from this, well, not on both sides, but worked with people on both sides. The first I want to say is everybody in this room who isn't a civil servant or public servant, I implore you, when you're in a position to push and to ask for change, you do so. It can feel like you're going up against a wall. It can feel like you're going up against insurmountable odds of legislation. But you can change it. By this, UCDS alone, the fact that it is now shared, proves it can be changed. It's one of the most sensitive data sets the DWP owns, and it can be shared with legitimate use cases now. And indeed, there's a whole shit ton of new things we can now share with it. It's amazing. The second thing is, if you are a civil servant, I implore you to really engage with those people. We've been lucky enough with DWP where we can engage with those people. There are people who will listen to us and they'll walk us through the steps we have to make to go to the lawyers and come back from the lawyers and go to the lawyers and come back to the lawyers. It happens a lot. And then the change happens. But you need those really engaged, really enthusiastic people on both sides. And there is that in this room. So please, please try.
Thank you very much. So government's not tracking you, but if it was, it would be better.
This is nonsense. So I've represented some of my customers against HMRC, and they were snooping into electronic communication. So this is absolute shite.
Well, maybe in some parts of government, but
No.
communicating between
No,
governments.
it was quite systemic.
Okay.
Please.
If you're interested to hear more about that, sorry, what's your name?
Kirill.
Grab Kirill after the break.
Yeah,
Yeah, when we're done. Cool. Thanks, Kirill. Okay, so I'm just going to wrap this up. We've got, I think, more drinks, maybe a little bit more food, and then afterwards, depending on how we're looking, there's a terrace. I'm looking for Ed to shake his head furiously. There's a terrace and maybe just a brewdog if we don't have any beer left. So quick reminders. Sorry. Very little bit. We're gonna send you to Brewdog then for further conversations. So, event WhatsApp group. In case you didn't get it earlier, we're gonna get some slides and more information. Keep talking in there. And our next event is next Monday, right? The AI Lightning Talks. So this is in partnership with Harvard Business School. We've got a bunch of them coming along. and it's going to be pretty good. This is sort of similar to this, but very, very hard deadlines on talk, so it's 3 minutes, rapid fire. They all have to put their slides in, and it's really a lot of fun. That's how this group started, actually. We did 2 AI lightning talk events. So Maurice and Nia, if you wave, they're the people to speak to about it. They're leading the charge there. The next one of these is about, oh sorry, I'll go back to that one. The next one of these is about robots. So we've done urban mobility, flying cars, building houses. Why can't I buy a house? We've done, what was the last one? My brain's space. Yeah, that one, that's cool. When will the UK land on the moon? Obviously this is why is government broken? The next one is where is my robot butler? We're going to have things like submarines that go and collect cool things from deep sea, I guess. We're going to have like a really popular YouTuber that like builds 3D prints robot dogs like Spot at home, which is really cool. There's a bunch of cool talks. We're finally like getting ahead and starting to plan all the speakers before the next one. We're starting to catch up, so that's good. Lots of really exciting talks. Scan the QR code, more coming. Thank you. Woo! Drink the rest of the beer so I don't need to take it home in an Uber and then go to Brewdog.
That was great. That's the first one I did.
Oh really?
The guy that space smile customer thing, the guy who works in space and stuff.
The event.
I'm Michelle. Great to meet you. Really nice to meet you.
That was really good. Yeah, no, sorry, the Jack.
I have to head off now, Joe.
Wait, are you off?
Good luck, all the best. Are you good at negotiating my location? All the best of that.
Well, see you soon then. Yeah, it's just like join the WhatsApp group because that's my most thing. Yeah, and then you get everything. Join if you join the channel. Oh, sorry.
There we go. I got the QR. Yeah, great.
Yeah, great. The general one, what's the general one, and
Interesting.
Further away, like 2 years, that is just one house of you get from Oxford, so one more year to make yeah, so one more year. You have to live in Oxford. It's less dynamic, less exciting. It's a good question, but I'm not too stressed out. Both are interesting. I mean, what I realized from this is so now all of these policies, economics, how to apply it to the numbers, I have no idea. Interesting to hear about I know that
Yeah.